Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ad Age In-Depth TV Pivot. For those of you just joining us, I'm Janine Poggi, editor of Ad Age. And for those of you watching at home today during the second half of our day, if you have any questions or comments, join the conversation. Post on our social platforms. We'll try to bring your questions and comments into our conversations throughout the rest of the day. Next up, I am pleased to welcome Joanne Ross, President and Chief Advertising Revenue Officer of Domestic Advertising at Paramount. Hi, Joanne.
Hello, how are you?
I am good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
What
Happy to be here.
what was it like being back at Carnegie Hall last week? I know you've been itching to get back.
Were you there, Janine? Did you watch?
I am here. Yeah, so I watched. I was streaming. Tell me what it was like being back there.
It was great. It was a lot of fun, and we do a very brief dress rehearsal the night before or rehearsal, and it's just very different when you walk out on the stage and there's a full house all the way up to the highest tiers, and you really just get totally jazzed by all the energy in the room, and like I can kind of see some people that I know in the front. So that was just, it was so great to be back live and in person. I'm sure you've heard the same from other executives, and just to kind of like wrap our arms around, like, here we are, we're back, everybody's healthy, God willing, and really just come to the stage as Paramount for the very first time. I mean, COVID really threw a wrench in everybody's works for the past 2.5 years.
That's for sure. I have to say the one thing I was disappointed on, you were not wearing a costume and you did not come like vaulting in through the ceiling or with some other like.
I know,
The
I
one thing
know.
I have to say that I was a little disappointed by.
Well, I tried to do my best, and I just could not upstage the Ghost musical number. So that was the best I could do. But yeah, that was a lot of discussion around that. But, stay tuned. There's more opportunities coming up.
I hope so. So
Yes.
this year's show, certainly looked different across the board for all of the players last week, than in years past. And for one, there's a far less emphasis on schedules and throwing up the grid and talking about the grid. And I'm wondering, how much do schedules matter anymore for advertisers?
Well, I think you do know that we put up the CBS broadcast schedule presented by Vanessa Lachey at the end of the presentation. And then the next morning, you do know that CW put up their schedule, and we're still in the business with CW. I think the broadcast schedules, as you see them, are still important to a lot of our clients, especially the CBS consumers, the CBS audience, because we have a very definitive audience. We are very, very stable. And in fact, our ratings did really well this past season for broadcast prime, as well as other day parts. So I do think it's important. The cable schedules, obviously, because of the depth and breadth of what the Paramount's cable side brings to the table, that would be impossible to do a schedule. But we do that on the website, so it's available for people to look at which each channel is bringing. I do think for linear, we're still in the broadcast business, we're still in the cable business, and it's not just going away. Obviously, audiences are shifting more to streaming, and we're positioned really well there with Pluto and Paramount Plus. So I think we'll always be putting up a broadcast schedule as long as people are still buying CBS, and I don't see that going away in the near future.
One of the other takeaways that I'd sort of been hearing over the past couple of days was, there was less of the momentum and conversation around the trailers themselves, the teasers for the show, which obviously has long been the point of the upfronts, and more about like the content genres and the breadth of content.
Right.
But I'm curious, like, what shows excite you the most right now? Where do you see opportunities, for brands next season?
Well, we have our sizzle reels are on the website, and you can go and watch them for broadcast. There's a couple of new shows that we have. So Help Me Todd, I really, really love that. It is definitely a CBS signature drama, but it's a light drama. Marcia Gay Harden is amazing, and the male lead, Skylar, is also amazing actor. Had a chance to sit with them a little bit at the after party, and they're so enthusiastic. And then the new drama that's on Friday night, East New York, is right up my alley. I'm a big viewer of broadcast. I think everybody knows that. I talk about our schedule a lot, but we're really, really excited. We had great drama development, as you saw. And if you want to see, you can go to the website. Also, some of the new shows that are coming on cable. And that's where we wanted to show the depth and breadth of the Paramount portfolio, not just to be focused on one thing. So that's why you saw a lot of sizzle, a lot of content. We also wanted to display our talent. We didn't want it to be executives talking head. In fact, I was the only executive, along with Scott Mills, who did the piece on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was really important. So I think that as this develops and as we continue to lean more into streaming, putting a lot of money into streaming, you'll see more of that. But obviously, the content that we put up there and the shows that people want to watch are still going to be displayed. You can't do all of that in a sizzle reel, especially in what we were trying to accomplish, which is 1 hour.
For sure. As you said, like you were trying to show the depth and breadth of Paramount. And of course, this is the first upfront where you're taking Paramount, the rebranded name, to the marketplace. How at all is this influencing the way you're going to the marketplace or taking the company as a whole to advertisers?
So I think that's a great question. And literally, we have had since the merger in 2019 and then going into COVID in early 2020, we've had 2 years of practice as Viacom CBS. And one of my biggest jobs was to unify the sales team, which we spent a lot of time doing that. And we have unified the team across the board, broadcast, cable, and digital. And basically, so when I said we've had a lot of practice, what was really interesting is that, like, once we made that name change, which was sometime in March, like it was almost like it was the easiest thing. Paramount just like was what we said. And in the beginning, we were doing Viacom CBS, CBS Viacom, like people were struggling with it. Paramount kind of like captures it all. And that is our branding going forward. So when I say we have practice, we've been selling across the board all of our assets for the past 2 years. And now it's really, really, we're hitting the ground running and really working well together. And our marketers, our clients, the holding companies, they all know who we are. My team is really strong. We've been in the business a long time. You recognize a lot of the faces on my executive team and underneath. So really proud of all the work that we've been doing as Paramount.
A big part of the conversations last week, and then I'm sure going into negotiations, is of course around streaming. You guys have Paramount Plus, you have Pluto. Can you talk about the streaming ad landscape, how you're thinking about the streaming business?
Yeah, so look, we were first movers with Pluto. Obviously, that has been a huge success story. We've talked about it. Bob has talked about it on earnings call. The growth of Pluto this past year, over $1 billion in revenue, and 65 million MAUs. And people really like it. Why? It's free. It's easy. And there is such deep content there. Then you look at Paramount Plus, which is basically, remember, we were first movers when we launched CBS All Access, rebranded it to Paramount Plus, and that has been amazing. Like the numbers there are crazy. Clients love our product. They love the position that we're in. So obviously, as I said, we're selling across the board. One of the unique things that we have versus the other guys in terms of the way that we're selling it is we developed a product last year called IQ, which is multi-platform, and it makes it really easy for the clients to buy in bundles or genres, as you mentioned earlier. So they know what they're buying. If they're buying sports, there's a sports bundle, there's a news bundle, there's an entertainment bundle, there's an inclusion bundle, DEI bundle, multicultural bundle. And that has worked really well because it allows clients to pick and choose, and they also can activate very quickly there. We control the reach, we control the frequency, and we continue to develop new products to make it easier to get in and kind of like get your deals done. So it's just been, I think, we don't get enough credit for where we were and where we are now. Really kind of, I believe, a leader with those platforms and with the IP that we have to offer for marketing and brand extension. So you should ask some of our clients because I think they would validate everything that I'm saying.
As you said, CBS has been in the streaming game for a while now. How are you thinking about the evolution of the streaming ad model? What's working? What isn't? What are new opportunities that you're thinking about bringing into the market?
Right. Another great question. So one of the things that I also pride my team on, especially on the digital side, that's led by David Luenda and his team, been doing it for a long time. they are always listening to what somebody else is doing, what the clients want, what do we have to do to make a better consumer experience, viewing experience. And David and his team work very, very closely with Tom Ryan, who was basically the architect of Pluto and leads the charge for all of our streaming products and how we're looking at ad models. So that is a constant conversation of input and output. But basically, if you listen to what your clients want and you're able to adapt and able to offer them these products, then you're going to be successful. And that's what we're doing. So it's kind of like a work in progress. And I think if you go back 2 years ago to where we are now, especially with what I just mentioned, the IQ product, it's just made it really easier and people are really, really leaning in. So more to come on that.
And there's definitely competition growing in the streaming landscape, especially on the ad supported side. We're seeing obviously Disney Plus coming to the marketplace, Netflix in the near future coming into the marketplace. How are you thinking about this growing competition in the streaming space?
So for us, I think it validates for what our play is, Pluto and Paramount Plus, validates that we were right to get into this business. And again, remember, we got into this business early days through CBS All Access and then rebranded. And it basically says, okay, this is going to be part of the future. This is going to be people leaning more in, and we were ahead of the curve. So look, I'm not afraid of competition because I always think that we're going to be ahead of the pack.
How much of the ad dollars do you expect to shift out of linear and into streaming during the upfronts?
So I knew you were going to ask that. We are, and I love you for asking it, but I'm not going to answer it because we are in active.
To ask
No,
it.
I know, but I love you for that. We're in active conversations, obviously. You can see I probably all the executives you've spoken to the past 2 days are in their offices. So we're in the upfront marketplace actively. So I think the best report card will be when the dust has settled. And if we can share with you, then we will. But right now, I'm not going to give any indication.
Well, can you provide a little bit of insight into the early outlook for the upfront marketplace then? Are there any concerns around the economic economic headwinds of
Look
what
at
demand will be? Yeah.
Absolutely. We've been dealing with these, supply chain issues, visibility issues, flexibility issues since the beginning of COVID, right? So we've had 2 years to kind of like work with our clients, take a look down the road. Obviously, supply chain has not resolved itself, is not going away. It affects some categories more than others. I mean, I said this the other day to somebody, like, would you ever think in our lifetime that the United States would have a shortage of infant formula? Like nobody saw that coming, right? And we're learning more and more about those microchips that go in the cars, and the minerals that go into the microchips are coming from Russia and Ukraine. Well, they're not coming now, unfortunately, due to what's going on over there. So we have to be flexible. We gave a lot of flexibility the first year of COVID, and we'll continue to do that to work with our clients. I think people are just going to be cautious about how they're doing their planning. They're going to be more meticulous about it, and they're not going to overstate, which I think is a good thing for everybody. So there's not like that fake inflation in the marketplace. The conversations that we've had so far have been really positive. I feel good about what we're offering. I feel good about where we're positioned. And again, we'll be doing a postmortem, right?
Yes, we will for sure.
Yes.
I'm just thinking about how measurement is going to play a role in this year's conversations. Obviously, ahead of the presentations, we've been hearing a lot about the role of Nielsen, alternative currencies, the way
Right.
everyone is testing various measurement tools. For Paramount, how are you thinking about this? What do you think going into the upfronts? Like, how much of deal making will still be done with Nielsen? Most of your friends over at the other networks are saying that Nielsen is still going to be paramount to
Yes.
negotiations. What do you?
Right. Well, it has to be, right? We can't just turn it around and all of a sudden be picking numbers out of the air with no validation. So Nielsen is definitely being discussed. However, side by side, and I'm sure you've read all the same things and heard the same things. We have done deals with VideoAmp, with ComScore. We're looking at Open AP and their Open ID platform. We are doing test and learns with clients. We did something with Dentsu in first quarter. We did a test and learn with Turner, Warner Brothers for NCAA, because we're in a joint venture with them in terms of alternative currencies. Working closely with Horizon came out a few weeks ago and said that they're going to do X% based on alternative currencies. Everybody's working towards the same goal. But for now, it's going to be, we'll have to have a parallel path, because you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And I think we've been ahead of the curve there. If you look back on the Viacom side, they have their Vantage product, which is advanced advertising. We're at 50 million households there that are activated. Clients are really leaning into that. We're seeing more money coming to Vantage than prior years. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation. When we're ready to really flip a switch, I think is down the road a ways. But right now, I think everybody really wants to embrace, like, what is going to be the best way to count every single impression, and how are we counting them, and what are the attributes that go along with those impressions. Again, like 3 years ago, we were talking about guarantees based on outcomes, and we're still talking about guarantees based on outcomes. So a lot going on, a lot to unpack, but we have the best group, I think, in terms of it's, we have experience in it, and we're lining ourselves up with the right companies to partner.
Within this conversation of measurement and data, one of the things that we've seen being talked about this year in particular is the rise of these so-called like data clean rooms in an effort to help
Right.
use more first-party data. Disney has announced some things, NBCU. How are you guys thinking about these sort of clean rooms and just the use of first-party data, as part of
Right.
deals?
Yeah, so this is not my expertise, but from what I'm learning as we go along, is that the most important part of having a data clean room is what is being fed into it, and how do we operationalize it. So those conversations are taking place. It has to provide the buyers who are looking at it. It has to provide consistent measurement. They have to know what they're looking at. So again, also a lot to unpack there, and that's why we're really excited about OpenAP, and we're working with them on their identity IP XPM. Again, learning as we go along. But yeah, I think that's a part of it. We've been talking about data clean rooms using other words, privacy, first party, second party, and now it's really coming to a head in a way that it's going to coalesce, and we will be looking at it very carefully going forward. It's interesting, because it provides something to the clients that they have been asking for a long time. So hopefully we'll make some progress there as well.
And definitely in this marketplace where you're thinking about the demise of the third party cookie and how brands are very eager to build their first party
Yep.
database, it's become, I guess, incredibly important, even more
Yep.
so because of that.
Yep, definitely.
I want to pivot a little bit. I want to talk about the sports marketplace. What is the state of sports right now? How are you thinking about NFL and all of the other
So I
live
have a big,
sports that we
I
have?
have a big smile on my face, because last night was the sports Emmys, and I don't have the full tally, but I do know that we won an Emmy for the Kansas City Buffalo game, which was that freezing cold game that went into overtime. And in fact, that game, I mean, not that we were playing in it, but we were broadcasting in it. That game did change the overtime rules for football going forward. And we also won an Emmy. We won several, but these are the two that stand out in my mind. We won an Emmy for RomoVision, which was really like brainchild of us working really closely with Sean McManus and his team and creating RomoVision. So we won an Emmy for that. But as you know, we announced our NFL schedule 2 or 3 weeks ago. Extremely happy. Really work closely with the NFL. Sean and Dave Burson do a great job. We got basically everything that we wanted. People are thrilled, especially Bogey and Tony, who get to sell it. So sports marketplace, as you know, during COVID, exploded. Everybody wanted to watch live sports. People were hankering, and they just wanted to see the action. We just had our PGA Championship this past weekend. Ended up in a surprise playoff. People were tuned in Saturday, then Sunday the numbers were great. We're still in business with Warner Brothers Discovery, with NCAA, March Madness, Final Four. So when you look at our sports portfolio, and I just realized we have this weekend, it's Memorial Day weekend, I guess, we have the UEFA Championship soccer on CBS. Thank you. From Paris, and very excited about that. So our portfolio is solid. We have our SEC, solid going forward, and just really, really happy that like basically the audiences that are coming are reflective of, across the board demos, right? It is across the board. It's not just men, okay? It's across the board, including kids. We do our simulcast with Nick, and we Nickify a game. We'll be doing that again this year. So, really happy and really proud to be selling that sports portfolio on behalf of Paramount. It's amazing.
What do you see as the opportunities around sports betting? It's a growing category for sure, and brands are eager to sort of experiment there. Like, what are you thinking about and strategizing around the rise of sports betting?
Oh, we're in conversation, as you probably can imagine, with all the major sports betting companies. We dipped our toe way back when, several years ago, before the merger with FanDuel and DraftKings. And obviously, it is a category. It is controlled within NFL, but not as controlled in other areas. So we have a list of clients that we're doing that with, and the money is going to continue to grow. I personally don't do sports betting, but I love seeing those commercials. Some of them seen a lot of, because you also have the local aspect, right? So if you're watching in New York, you're seeing local, stations buys, but it's not a category that's going away. Let's put it that way.
Joanne, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us. Always good to see you.
Great seeing you, and thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't mention today's the anniversary of George Floyd and yesterday's terrible, terrible events. So just really here to support everybody, here to support our clients and our friends and my colleagues. So thank you. It was great seeing you. Have a wonderful session.
Thank you, Joanne. Next up, I want to bring in my colleague, senior TV reporter Katie Keck.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you, Joanne. That was wonderful. I have with me now Rob Tuck, Executive Vice President of National Sales for the CW. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, Katie, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am excellent.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you for being with us.
Look, I'm feeling like a radio DJ right now.
That's great. Well, listen, I want to just congratulate you on a successful upfront. It was definitely a fan favorite. You had a whole room of advertisers on their feet for Stevie Wonder.
It was great.
So yeah. How was it back being at upfronts in person?
You know what? It felt as if it was yesterday. It did not feel like we had missed 3 years. Once you get back on that stage, it just feels like it was yesterday that you were rehearsing for the prior year. So it was good. We were happy to do it. We think it's a great place to showcase the content that you have, and ultimately give the advertisers a taste of what we're thinking for the coming year.
So. Yeah, and you did actually. I wanted to touch on that. This was an upfronts that featured very few trailers, and the CW was very trailer heavy for its fall slate coming up. So, what was the decision there? To make sure that you were premiering some of your upcoming content.
I mean, bottom line is the advertisers are they're investing in your network or your properties for the shows that you're putting out there. And the best way to show them that is give them a taste of the shows or the content that we ultimately are creating for the next season. And we thought that was vital. I mean, we didn't necessarily, I don't feel like we necessarily had to worry about pitching different platforms and, a digital platform, because we've been pitching that for well over a decade now. So I think if we tried to make that somewhat a new avenue for us, it would have seemed strange. But the bottom line is our content is what is going to ultimately help us sell this network and for advertisers to invest in the future. And regardless of whether it's on the linear platform or the digital platform, that's key. And they have to know what they're investing in. So the ultimate goal was to give them a taste of the shows that we're bringing to market next year.
Yeah, absolutely. So content featured very heavily in the presentation itself. However, before your presentation, you call. And you mentioned your deal with Brightline and keeping users engaged to move the sales needle. Can you kind of expand on CW's approach to interactive ads and how it's thinking about that space?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're the small guy. We don't have as many resources as everybody else has out there. I think I used the line in that pre-call that we really feel like the advertisers know more about our audience than we do because they have more resources than we do. But Brightline has been a company that we as well as others have been using for the last couple of years, and I think our advertisers definitely have warmed up. Those that are using it feel very comfortable using it. I think they got a great product, and we feel that that's a good avenue for the advertiser to take their messaging one step further. We are certainly open to other opportunities, but as I said, we are somewhat limited on resources. So we tried to pick the best opportunity for those guys to jump in.
Sure. So there has been a pretty significant shift over to AVOD with some of the biggest players now in the space, with Netflix and Disney and everybody else introducing or launching with ad-supported models. Now, CW has kind of an interesting approach to streaming. You make your content available without a login and without a subscription, which I think is a really interesting approach to streaming. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, from day one, way back when, I could say it really started in the days of Gossip Girl. We knew that our advertiser, our consumer and viewer, were watching on the digital platform. Quite honestly, we put the shows up on the digital platform, and there was a little bit of concern within the company that was taking away viewership from linear. And the fact of the matter is, whether it was or wasn't, our audience was shifting over to the digital space, particularly on a phone or a tablet or on their computer. And so what we noticed was we tried to take it down on digital, and our parent studios realized that the shows were popping up illegally. They were being pirated on different sites. And so the bottom line is, if you can't beat them, join them. You got to bring it back to the digital platform. And I think ultimately that's really where we grew out of. We realized that the consumer is going to want to watch our stuff on the digital platform. We have to put it there. We know that our audience is younger. They don't want to go to their parents, quite honestly, to ask them for what's our account number and what password did you create. We thought that creating no barrier for entry, allowing them to just go on, click and play and watch the shows was key. And the only thing that we asked you to do at the time, we were the only ones, was to watch the commercials, because ultimately it's the advertiser support that continues to keep this content going on this network. So that was our price of entry, was watch commercials and you get to watch the shows for free.
Yeah, so we are seeing a lot of money shift from linear to digital spaces and apps. So I'd like to kind of, get your read on this change in the space. Yeah,
I mean, it's probably newer for everybody else, more so than it is for us, because of the fact, as I said, we've been doing this for well over a decade. We saw our audience shifting quickly. Certainly Nielsen wasn't counting it, and we were suddenly seeing it on the digital side. And so we knew that shift was happening. The advertisers knew that shift was happening, particularly early on with our audience. And, so we don't necessarily have a concern with advertisers shifting over to digital, the amount that they shift over to digital, because ultimately we sell a multi-platform environment to them. So our approach is the same. You buy it wherever you need to buy it. We're ultimately delivering you the audience that is going to appear, on that platform. We just want them to watch the shows. We want them to be able to have the ability to watch the show, and we want the advertisers to have the ability to connect to our audience wherever they may be viewing it.
Now, you mentioned Nielsen, which leads me into my next question. I would be remiss not to ask about alternative currencies and measurement right now. Can you talk to me a little bit about how the CW is thinking about this?
Well, that's a sore subject. Listen, it is honestly, it is vital for this industry to develop a multi-platform measurement. I know that each network has probably approached it in their own, their own view and their own take of things. I think in order for this industry to move ahead, it is going to require both sides. It is going to require all networks, all agencies to have some skin in the game and to have some say in the game, because the audiences are different. And so some things tend to react a little bit differently with the numbers, but it is important. We were the first ones over 10 years ago. We created convergence. Ultimately, it turned into fluidity on the other guys. I guess I didn't like the name convergence at the time, but we didn't care. But that was really the start of us, I think, to some degree, simplifying the measurement, because we brought it right down into eyeballs and impressions, and we were able to pull TV and linear audience measurement and audience delivery together for the advertisers, and the advertisers totally jumped on board. And quite frankly, we know the advertisers shared our deck with the other networks, and it was passed around because we were hearing it back through the industry. That I had fielded tons of questions as to what exactly are you guys doing. I know my entire staff, Brian Doherty, was getting the same thing, and we brought it through it. We thought it was fairly simple. It certainly worked at the time. It's not the be all end all. I do think now that measurement, because the platforms, digital is so much more mature now. The overall viewing needs to come together, but it's not easy, and I think everybody's been taking their shot at it, and it's probably going to take a little bit more to fully figure it out. But hopefully each side gets to work together, because it's going to be silly if we just create it and then we ask the buyers to buy it, and if each network creates their own, it doesn't help the buying community, and it's not going to be accepted. So
right. So there's a lot happening in the economy right now. We have the war in Ukraine, we have inflation, we have supply chain issues, and all of these seem to be impacting ad budgets. I'm hearing as often as daily adjustments.
Yep.
So, what is your read on this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my team yesterday. I mean, this is probably one of the worst. We're about the lowest of the lows in terms of all bad news. Certainly, the economy is having issues, inflation and recession talks, and the war, and every other problem. The issue with guns, and it just doesn't seem to end with the bad news. I certainly feel that you'd be kidding yourself if you didn't think it was going to impact spending this year to a degree. But I think at the same time, advertisers still have to get their messaging out and the product out to the consumer, because this too shall pass. It's going to take a while, in my opinion, but this will pass. And the advertisers that have been out there front and center, are going to be the ones that, I think lead in that game of getting a consumer to buy their product. But it's going to impact it to what degree, I'm not quite sure. It's the economic model that we all live in is supply and demand. We all know, it's obvious, the supply has been going down as well. So it's a matter of what that balance is in terms of how far does the demand fall off, advertiser budgets fall off, to mix with the supply issue. I still think I don't know that the budgets are going to fall off that much. Again, they may shift to digital, but again, for us, that doesn't matter. It's all one pie as far as we're concerned. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So lastly, we touched on the CW apps, access to its content and eliminating those barriers to entry for its fans, which I think is a fantastic business strategy. But how do you sort of plan to keep the CW standing out against all of these increasingly either ad-supported or free streaming tiers? I mean, the market is just flooded with options right now.
It is. And I think the bottom line comes to where we started this conversation. It's about content. And we know the greatest challenge that faces this network is creating enough content and more content that our consumer wants. And the more that you can provide that, the more you're going to hold on to, to that viewer. I mean, us merging the two apps together, CW and CW Seed, we get to provide the premium content that's on the linear platform. We're almost all of our shows now are going to be full stack in the coming year, and then CW Seed is providing curated premium content, some of which was off network from the WB days and CW past CW hits, as well as some other networks. But it's all curated to appeal. We look to buy content that's going to appeal to our consumer. So I think if quantity doesn't necessarily mean quality. There is a lot of content being created for these streaming services. It's not necessarily all good. And quite frankly, it's probably not being watched by a whole heck of a lot of people. You don't hear about that. You always hear about the big shows that everybody has. So, the key for the CW and our unified app is just to fill it with the best quality content we can that viewers want to watch.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for all of that. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Rob from the CW, thank you for being with us.
Take care. Thanks, Katie.
Next, I'd like to introduce my colleague and Ad Age's editor-at-large, Jack Neff, who will be moderating our panel on measurement. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Katie. Thanks. And thanks, everybody, for sticking around here for our last session of the day. This is on TV measurement, which has been a hot topic of late in the industry. Marketers and agencies have been a bit less vocal on the subject than networks and, of course, the service providers, but we're going to try to reverse that a bit with today's final panel. And I have with me today Melissa Grady-Diaz, Chief Marketing Officer of Cadillac at General Motors, Joanne Leong, Vice President and Director of Global Media Partnerships at Dentsu, and Rob Master, Vice President of Media and Digital Engagement for Unilever North America. And I thought I would start off kind of open-ended with everybody, just get your top-line thoughts, your assessment of the state of TV measurement in the U.S. And Melissa, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time right now with TV measurement and measurement overall, really. When we look at and there's kind of a weird echo coming through, if you all hear that. Does it sound funny for you all? Yeah. So I'll say a bit, and if it keeps doing that, I'll switch audio in a second. But I think measurement, Ben, let someone else take it, and let me see if that's me that's doing that.
Yeah, you were cutting out a bit. Joanne, let's try get your.
Yeah. So I think, it's kind of what Melissa was kicking off with. I think it's a really interesting time, just in general in the industry in terms of TV measurement. I know that with everything that happened with Nielsen, it really, I think it really has kind of like reignited the focus on what I think had already been an ongoing discussion around true cross-platform measurement. It's one of those things that it's not a new challenge, but again, I think we're kind of seeing this revigoration of trying to find that successor to what had been historically Nielsen's monopoly. And I think from a Dentsu standpoint, what we're seeing is we're seeing lots of testing and learning practices that are happening with different companies. And from our standpoint, we haven't necessarily identified a true, I guess, like winner, as you would say. It's one of those things where it's a really important decision and one that shouldn't necessarily be rushed. But I think we'll start to see a lot more clarity as we get into 2023.
Yep. Let me try to jump in now. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think just to build on what Joanne was saying, and I definitely agree with that. I think when we look at TV measurement, we don't really look at it in isolation. We're looking at it across everything, because TV is really moving to video, right? Like, we no longer just look at linear in isolation. We now have connected TV, and then that goes into digital as well. So we are looking at some of the more traditional ways like Nielsen and what does that look like, and looking at testing and learning, not only for just TV, but in the cross measurement space as well, which I think is what we're all very interested in. And it's interesting right now, because I think for digital, 3 years ago, we were in a great place. And now as we look at cookie deprecation, digital is a little bit more amorphous than it has been. And some parts of TV, with some of the testing and learning we're doing, is becoming a little bit more clear. So we're looking for fidelity across right now. And I think that's really, it is right now at a test and learn, and there isn't anything definitive that we'd say this is the winner.
Rob, what's your take on things?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said. I think I don't think I'm being overly dramatic if I were to say we're facing kind of a crucible moment around measurement more broadly. Obviously, it's not just linear TV that's under duress. I think the deprecation of the cookie, I think the emerging digital streaming landscape, as that expands with different kind of measurement components. I think the growth of retail media platforms, and they're working off of different kind of measurement. And so if you just take us as advertisers, the amount of investment now that's going into, I think, platforms or in an ecosystem that has, I think, an array of measurement issues or challenges. When you combine that with cross-platform, which we've been driving, multi-touch attribution, both work in progress, I really feel like this is a really crucible moment for us to take stock of where we are.
Rob, are you engaged in any of the experimentation on alternate currencies in the upfront? Do you think you'll do any deals on alternative currencies?
Yeah, so at this point, we're using Nielsen in this upfront, and we're sticking to a single currency in this process. But we're certainly partnering. We're working with Group M and piloting a number of players, whether it be Comscore, iSpot, VideoAmp, even working with Nielsen as well, as we kind of prepare for a future marketplace going forward. So no shortage of pilots, but we're sticking to a single currency for now, but at least for this upfront.
Melissa, are you engaged in any of the alternative currency tests, and think you'll use them as currency?
Definitely testing right now. I think we're just going into the upfronts right now, so not clear yet exactly where we'll land on all of that. But we are definitely still working in the traditional space and looking at testing as well.
Then, Joanne, I know Dentsu is involved in a number of tests with a number of players and such, so I know the answer there. But I guess I was wondering, from your point of view, looking into the future, do you think we end up with one currency that's going to rule them all, or is it going to be a multiple currency world?
Yeah, I think that's like literally the multi-billion-dollar question. I think honestly, like going forward in the future, we will see a multi-currency world with a lot of good options. But I think something that we need to kind of think through, and like what the challenge will be, is how that will be operationalized. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. Basically, how all of that will be figured out. So things like how this will be factored into modeling, how will we provide holistic reach. I do think we will see lots of good currency options, but I guess the challenge is how could all of that work together with the systems that we have in place.
Rob, what's your take? Do you think we need to gravitate toward a single, maybe better currency, or will we be in a multi-currency world?
Well, I actually want to take a step back because I think we're headed to this multi-currency situation now in all the piloting and testing, which is concerning. I think, listen, I appreciate that media companies and publishers have taken an active lead. I think you opened with that. And I do think it's time for marketers and agencies to really rally around this issue and take a much more proactive. I think a measurement solution should be buyer-led versus seller. And I think, I get concerned about like the chaos that can ensue with multiple currencies from different publishers, different advertisers, different agencies. I mean, at some foundational level, I think to be consistent, we should have a single currency. Otherwise, maybe there's solutions for these, but I think, as Joanna alluded to, like how they fit into our different systems. How do you manage yield if you're a publisher? What's the exchange rate? I mean, these are just some of the questions that go into multiple currencies that I think, who dictates the currency decision, right? And so I think, and by the way, on top of all that, we have like this whole digital landscape of sets of metrics that we want to like layer on. So I think that hopefully we can rally around a flexible single currency, but certainly we're open. The reality is it's very easy to talk about multiple currencies, but when you actually like peel back a little bit, just a little bit, you start to see the enormous challenges.
I was going to say I was going to be contrarian, but then Rob kind of came around a little at the end. I do think we need flexibility moving forward. You started off by talking about inventory going down, and we know the world that we live in and where we are. I think that there is going to need to be flexibility. We're going to need standardization, but as we see viewership changing, as we see patterns of engagement changing, as we see ad formats changing, pause ads, for instance, versus a regular linear ad versus a connected TV ad. And as we start to look at, I think, how do we really define reach, frequency, and engagement? And is that by audience? Is that by individual? How do we measure extended reach? All of these things, I think, are going to mean that there's not going to be one single. However, that being said, there needs to be standards that we're all working towards. So if we're talking about reach into an audience, we understand and we're all saying the same thing. If we're talking about engagement, if we're talking about whatever those things are, as video changes and as things become more interactive, we're going to need standards that are the same, but I don't know that there will be single currency.
Yeah, so I agree. I think actually, to me, that's measurement on the currency. So maybe with like nuance, but I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think like engagement, like the KPIs, the types of ad units, it's the measurement behind it. But in the end, like, it's the currency. So just to clarify, I'm talking more currency than I totally agree with on measurement of that currency. We should be very flexible, to Melissa's point. Totally agree.
Joanne, I know you've done some work on engagement measurement in particular with media, and you tend to think of it being as more applicable to digital media in many cases, but is that necessarily the case? Is it applicable to TV as well? And is it something that can be used as a currency in deals?
Yeah, so I think for us, in terms of the work that we've done around engagement, the most robust has been within the space of attention and the use of attention metrics. So at Dentsu, we have an initiative called the Attention Economy, which is in its 4th year, and we've been looking at how do we create standardized definitions around what attention means and how do we use that across different platforms. And so it's really interesting because in the past, for example, we worked with a company called T-Vision Insights, and we have tested attention as a currency within the TV space. So I definitely think that it is applicable within the TV market, and there's a lot of really interesting things that you could do with that type of data. So for example, one of the things that we looked at were viewability guarantees, where, some of the really interesting metrics that T-Vision had were, is someone even present in the room? So kind of creating a viewability benchmark for TV that can be applied, not exactly defined the same way as digital, but also to create some type of qualification that would, create a greater opportunity to see. So I definitely think that there's a lot of interesting things that you could do within the TV market as well, and can be used from a cross-platform standpoint.
Melissa, is attention and engagement, are those metrics that you're interested in looking at and possibly doing deals on?
I think probably everyone is, right? Like it's really the gold standard is, did someone see and like and do something about what you presented with them? And so we're always looking to make sure that our creative and what we're serving is going to drive engagement or to drive interest at least. So being able to measure that really is the epitome of where we're trying to get to.
Rob, how about you? Does it make sense to try to do deals on engagement and attention?
Yeah, no, and I think it goes back to this standard or foundation. So I think there's like this currency around core, like the core foundation currency is around like counting the ad exposures, like the who and how many. And then from that, I think you can build a host of different like business outcomes and measurements based on the different brands, different business KPIs, business needs. So, I think that's something that we're certainly interested in. I want to make sure we don't lose sight of the foundation, and these are builds on top of it. Because of course, attention is, as they both said, is like, I think that's obviously a gold standard. But I do want to make sure that there's different KPIs and that there is still reach, and I do concern a little bit concerned about the scaling and accountability. The actionability of engagement metrics on their own. But again, I think it's definitely something we're interested in.
There's been a lot of discussion in the industry about multicultural measurement and deficits in actually properly capturing multicultural audiences. But there's also the belief by some on the buy side that really the focus is on getting the general market number right first, and then we'll fix multicultural. And just wanted to get your thoughts on the state of things in terms of how well we are capturing diverse audiences, and whether we need to fix that as part of the general market solution. Joanne?
Yeah, I definitely think that they should be tackled together. I think part of the problem in the past is that multicultural efforts have historically been an afterthought, and I definitely think that it should be at the forefront and that they should be done in tandem. And I think it's hard to kind of separate the two, because I think, with our changing demographics, multicultural audiences are increasingly becoming a really core part of the general market. So I think that there shouldn't be, I think creating that separation almost reinforces that it is a bit of an afterthought. So I think that we should be doing them in tandem.
Melissa, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it absolutely needs to be done in tandem and thought of holistically. I think, there are times when you may be doing something that's a little bit more specific, or with a media partner, maybe that doesn't have some of the standard measurement, where we have to help and make sure that we understand what are we transacting on. But from a perspective of how we're looking at the market and how we're buying things, it's definitely a holistic approach.
Rob, your thoughts on this?
I think the industry it's like a non-starter to me from an industry perspective. How do you define what general market even means anymore? Just look at the recent census data. 40% of the population, we're increasingly becoming more racially blended. I think it's such an integral, large part of the general market, in air quotes. So I think from the beginning, we should be looking at this, incorporating and kind of getting it right from the start. And I would build on that, is because you asked how we're doing there. I think we need to ensure that as we're thinking about the panel data and the big data sources, that we're accurately representing both kind of like racial, but also I think socioeconomic, regional differences. I think that can easily get lost in both panel and big data. And I think it's important that we think about that, those aspects as well.
I think Janine and Joanne Ross earlier were talking about outcomes as a possible deal currency too, and there are a whole bunch of outcomes out there. And some folks believe that you can bypass some of the audience measurement issues by just measuring what people actually do in response to the advertising, rather than than the number of people who saw it. And I was just wondering if any of you have thoughts on the degree to which outcomes can be a measurement currency of the future in TV. Melissa?
Yeah, I think it's something, I love it, right? Like, let's definitely outcomes. We focus on outcomes everywhere. Everything that we're doing, what are we trying to drive? What is the behavior, or what is the thought, feeling, action that we want to drive? So anywhere that we can measure that and even buy on that is great. I think as we start to talk about standardization and measurement, and making sure that those outcomes are real human outcomes, that starts to become more and more important. So need to go into it cautiously, but absolutely, I think there's, like I said, we want outcomes everywhere. So the more we can measure and transact on that, the better.
Rob, any thoughts on how eager you are to incorporate outcomes into the mix?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think it goes back to the foundation. Like, let's get the foundation right, and then we can build these different, like we talked about engagement before. I mean, we're already talking about outcomes. We haven't even cracked engagement yet, or even cracked basic, like who's seeing and how many. So yeah, I'm with Melissa. I think we're constantly looking at outcome based. And like, it's funny because oftentimes we talk about performance media, performance marketing, and we think about that only as lower funnel. The reality is everything we do is performance media. It's just, what is the KPI? So we're running a Super Bowl commercial, like there's specific KPIs associated with that. That isn't necessarily lower funnel, but it's certainly performance. And so I think Melissa said it best when she said we're constantly focused on business outcomes. I think it's getting that like standard like foundation first, and then let's build on top from there.
I was just having that conversation with somebody earlier about the idea of performance marketing, and isn't it all supposed to perform in some way? But I
mean, it makes it like what we've been doing for the last like 10, 20, 30 years wasn't performance. It was just having fun with billions of dollars. No, it was performance. It was just it was KPIs that continue to evolve.
Joanne, just across the client base broadly, do you see a lot of interest in incorporating outcomes into deals in some way?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, similar to Melissa and Rob, it's the gold standard for a lot of our clients, right? It's something that a lot of our clients are super, super interested in. I think, we have been doing a lot of testing in that space for the past couple of years. It hasn't, there's pockets of opportunities depending on the client. It isn't a scaled approach yet, but I think, similar to what both Melissa and Rob are saying, it's like, how do we get it right, and how do we get the approach right, which is what a lot of this experimenting and testing and learning that we're doing is going to help us achieve.
Agreed.
Thanks very much. I think that's all the time we have right now. I'd like to thank you all for coming. It's been great and fun, so I appreciate it. And I want to thank again our co-presenting sponsors, Cadence, LG Ads, and Mountain. As always, a big thank you to our Ad Age live stream dream team, Alfred Mascaroni, Anna Secula, Lauren Ciardio, and Arabella Breck for all their work on this digital event. And I would like to thank my fellow Ad Age moderators, Janine Poggi, Katie Keck, John Dioso, and Natalie Zavat. I want to remind everyone that video footage of today's sessions will be available on demand for the next 30 days. And please keep reading adage.com. And thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it.